presented by Awesemo.com. I'm Alex Baker, joined today by Phill Bennetzen. Phill, how are you doing today?
Good, Alex. How are you, bud?
Not too bad. Excited for the race tonight, man. Like these prize pools on DraftKings and FanDuel are unreal. I mean, we're seeing 200K to the winner, and that could change someone's life tonight. So pretty excited about trying to win one of these prizes. So I'm excited to talk to you about the strategies, but let's start first with kind of like the broad overview. So we just saw the qualifying race about 30 minutes ago, and we saw some developments where if you made your lineup before 3 p.m. today, you're going to have to go back and change it all because, I mean, we saw some wrecks, some bad performances, and then the pole setter, Kurt Busch. I mean, that was an unexpected name. So how are we going to make sense of what happened in qualifying today?
Yeah, like you said, if you went into this morning building lineups with an idea of this is kind of the main core that I want to go with, you can probably throw that out the door because we've got three guys that turned in bad qualifying attempts. One guy, Ryan Blaney, starting 26th. According to his team, he really didn't push it that hard. Then you've got Matt Dibenedetto. Let's just call him Matt DiBurrito. His last name is impossible to say. People complain about me having a bad last name. This guy, he's been cursed. Matt ended up getting into the wall. He pancaked it with his right side. He's going to be starting 33rd on the grid, but he is going to be starting at the tail end of the line because he's going to a new car. And then Aric Almirola didn't even turn in a qualifying lap. He spun out during his qualifying session, didn't actually get an official time, so he's starting 40th. So you've got three major key pieces of chalk that are dramatically affecting your lineup builds. And then when you go to the top, like you were talking about with an unlikely pole sitter here with Kurt Busch. Now, yeah, Kurt will grab a pole from time to time, but Kurt is definitely he's not one of those guys that you figure from the top tiers that's going to grab a pole. I was looking at his career numbers. The last time that Kurt won a race from the pole was back in 2002, which is unbelievable, back when he was racing for Roush Fenway. And right beside him, you've got Jimmie Johnson. It's an unlikely pair for the front row. This would if it almost reminds you maybe of a Coke 600 from 2007, 2008 with these two, and then you throw Matt Kenseth starting fourth. You've got some other guys in there like the RCR guys of Reddick and Dillon starting fifth and sixth. More than likely, they trimmed out more than they needed to for the qualifying session, and they're going to fall back. But you have some unlikely guys at the front. Your potential dominators are starting a few rows back, and then littered throughout the 20s and the 30s, you've got some major pieces of chalk. So this has definitely presented for an interesting lineup construction build.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting developments from the qualifying. We talked over them, but we'll break them down into greater detail during the show. But if you're banking on Almirola or Dibenedetto kind of making a run here, make sure to click that like button. That it improves our prognostication power greatly. So I'm sure we'll be having a lot of these guys in our lineups. We need some good luck to go our way. All right, so one thing I've been noticing, let's talk about the general overview strategy for the Coke 600 because this race is 400 laps. That's a lot longer than average. And I'd say that means there's going to be more points scored by these top price guys because we have 400 laps today. Last time it was about 250, and the race before was 290. So that's an extra, like 75 points, and mostly going to top guys. So how is your lineup construction going to change this week based on the number of laps?
Well, before qualifying happened, I was definitely locking in two dominators with an eye towards a third. But now we've got this question: does a third dominator end up as a better value than these place differential guys who cost $1,000 to $2,000 less. And you know, you run the simulations, more than likely these place differential guys are going to end up scoring just as many points and becoming better value. But I mean, you can never take anything for granted. A lot of people can remember a couple of years ago when Kevin Harvick started dead last. I believe that he was somewhere near 75% owned in the majority of tournaments, and he had a issue early into stage one, and he finished 39th. So, I mean, we can't just take it for granted that the place differential guys will just automatically move up 15, 20, 25 spots, and that their values will surpass the potential of a third dominator. But more than likely, these guys like Almirola and Blaney are going to be crucial parts of your lineup builds with your two dominators.
Yeah, definitely. So because we have some mid-price guys that we can really bank on, that opens up the possibilities to maybe going less on the dominators and not punting the guys like, that are in the 5K range. So wide open lineup construction tonight. You could go 3 dominators, but you're going to be foregoing some of those core pieces like Almirola and Blaney that are in the mid range. And we did see the other night a very interesting thing where sometimes the dominators don't score well. And we saw that with Chase Elliott the other night. Very good race. But then, of course, Kyle Busch spins him out at the end. He drops all these places. And you're left with a mediocre performance. So you can't bank on the top dominator, being in the winning lineup even. So, yeah, I think that a lot of interesting strategy tonight. I want to mention that incident because I'm wondering, are there going to be repercussions on Kyle Busch here, or like maybe some street justice, as we used to call it? Well, what do you make of that situation?
Possibly, but I did see that probably 10 years ago, Kyle Busch wouldn't have made this move, but Kyle did reach out to Chase, and like he apologized for what happened. Like he went out of his way to discuss what happened from his side of things to Chase. Now Chase, that didn't make Chase feel any better about what happened, but perhaps that hatchet has been buried. But if it's these two fighting for second place like they were Wednesday night, maybe somebody gives somebody a love tap in the rear corner, and Kyle ends up going spinning this time.
So one just general question about this is it possible to spin someone out consistently without damaging your own chances, or is it kind of like you're really risking your fortunes in the race as well?
You can easily get somebody loose going into a corner by just taking side drafting and taking the air off their car, and if you do it close enough, you can essentially spin them out without ever having to touch them. But what happens when that driver starts trying to overcorrect his vehicle? Does he go right and hit the wall, or does he go left and end up taking you out in the process? It's one of those things that's really going to be determined in the moment.
Yeah, so I mean, that kind of move is a risky one to say the least. So I'm not expecting necessarily a revenge, but I wouldn't be shocked if it happens because from what I understand about the situation, Kyle or Chase Elliott's crew chief was Kyle Busch's crew chief or something like that. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there is some sort of like bad blood potentially. I have no idea, but something to keep an eye out for.
Right.
Now I want to talk a little bit about the previous races, the Real Heroes 400 and the Toyota 500. What did we see over those 2 races that is going to be relevant today?
Picking, you can go through with a fine tooth comb and pick out stuff, but trying to take these correlations from the egg-shaped 1.3 mile Darlington and transfer that over to Charlotte, it's going to be hit or miss. What we can take is say, okay, who was good at Vegas, who was good at Fontana, and then who continued that into the race at Darlington. And Alex Bowman, we pumped him up last Sunday. He had a great race. We talked about Martin Truex Jr., how the numbers were lying about how good he's been, and he consistently ran well in both races. We're definitely going to mention him tonight. Kyle had his issues Sunday, but then come back Wednesday night, and Kyle's just his typical self. And Kevin Harvick has shown to be the best driver in this package so far this year. And it doesn't matter whether it's day or night. Kevin is running really, really well in this 550 horsepower package. And we talked about lineup construction, overall ideas. A place that you could diverge because Kevin starts 22nd is that you could possibly look at a single dominator build and then add in Kevin, not only because of his 20-plus place differential, but Kevin definitely has the potential to get forward and grab some dominator points himself.
Yeah, definitely. Some of those guys that start in the middle, they're going to be able to get as many dominator points as the guys starting up front because it is such a long race. I've been really looking into this pole, how the pole position affects drivers, and it seems to really only matter a ton in stage one. After stage one, whoever finishes in first doesn't necessarily have a huge advantage over the rest of the field. It's kind of peculiar, but I guess a couple of things is that these are the fastest cars in qualifying, which means they have a lot of top speed, and also maybe drivers don't care as much about how they're placed throughout the first part of the race. Now, one additional feature of tonight's race is there's actually a fourth stage. It's every 100 laps we get a reset. Does that have any relevance for how you're going to approach the DFS?
The point that you make about the pole sitters, it is very interesting because we keep having this off again, on again romance with the pole sitter and the race here. Like if I go to the race sheets and I look at the laps led data, I can see in 2013 the pole sitter led a total of 6 laps. You go to the next year, it was 164. You go to 2015, it was just 26. Go to 2016, 392 of the 400 laps. You go to 2017, 45. You go to 2018, 377, and then last year with William Byron leading only 31 laps. It's an even year. So does Kurt Busch lead half or more of the race? Probably not. That could just be a whole bunch of noise. But there is a point for understanding that this is basically 2 races combined into one. You've got the race that will start in the dead of the afternoon. It's pretty hot there in Charlotte. Generally, this is a hot race with temperatures in the 90s. But then this race transitions into a night race. If everything finishes like it should, and we don't get any interference from the rain, this race is going to end about midnight or so locally. So this is definitely going to be a race of transitions. And if you have a short-sighted crew chief or team that sets their cars up just to run well in the heat of the afternoon going into the evening, well, of course, yeah, that car is going to fade, while you're going to have these drivers like we're expecting with Harvick and with Truex, that as the night comes on, then the cars are going to reach their potential, and these will be the guys that we expect to see at the front. And you've got some guys we've already talked about with the RCR guys, but I kind of don't believe in the speed that Kurt Busch has. Then you look at Matt Kenseth in 4th, and then in starting 21st is Ross Chastain. He's driving the 77 this week. This was one of the previously scheduled rides in the 77 for Chastain that's going to have Chip Ganassi affiliation with it. So think of the 77 as a Chip Ganassi car with just half the calories. So all of these Chip Ganassi related vehicles, they're showing pretty good speed. The 77 showing a lot of relative speed for the kind of car that it is. And my fear is that these cars are set up too well for what it is right now, whether that means a daytime setup or qualifying trim, that's to be seen.
Yeah, so a lot of interesting dynamics. Like Phill and I were talking earlier about how some guys change sponsors from week to week, and it sounds like Chastain is one of those guys where if you're looking at previous stats, just throw them out the window because it's a whole different situation today. Now the Vegas odds aren't terribly high on him, so I'm taking a wait see approach because usually they're pretty sharp. All right, so and also last week I think the 77 was like Greg Galding or something. So like if you're a casual observer like me of NASCAR, I mean I look at the data, but I don't really know the dynamics. Are we expecting like what's the difference between the 77 last week with Greg Galding and the 77 this week with Chastain?
Money. We got money. We got sponsorship. We got affiliation. Yeah. These drivers, they, especially these guys that race for Rick Ware, you'll kind of, the combination of Reed Sorensen, J.J. Yeley, Ross Chastain, Greg Galding, all these guys that race for Rick Ware, it seems like they'll bounce around and they'll go to a different car number, and it makes you wonder if Rick Ware tells the guys, okay, whoever's got the most sponsorship money coming in this week, they get this car over here because it's got the most money that we can throw at it. It's shenanigans, and quite frankly, this is the problem that you have in Xfinity, where essentially a lot of these guys are just buying their rides with their sponsorships.
Yeah, we see that with Kyle Busch being like better than 50% to win in some of those races. So pretty interesting. We got a big race tomorrow, so that'll be exciting to talk about. All right, so let's talk about some dominators. I know you guys are watching. You want the picks. First, I gotta mention this promo we have right now because you're gonna want to hear this. You can get the premium information for today's race for $2 using the NASCAR 600 coupon code. So that's the projections, the ownership, and top driver school that just developed, which has the chances that each player will be one of the top dominators, one of the top scorers, and also the placement points, which are all kind of things you want to balance in your lineup. So make sure to use that NASCAR 600 code. All right. So we got to start off with Kurt Busch because last week, I mean, he was the chalk of all chalk because he's starting so far back. It's like the opposite now. He's starting first, which can be a chalky position. But I actually have him as the fourth. I have him leading the fourth most laps, 40 of the 400 of any guy in the field because of that number one starting position, and he's reasonable price. So if he leads a majority of the first stage and gets fastest laps, and then kind of finishes in that 10 to 15 range, you're looking at maybe a winning lineup piece. So what are you doing with Kurt Busch on the pole today?
Definitely not touching him in cash, but in tournaments, I mean, you are talking about, he's not going to have the number one pit stall that got assigned via the finishing position on Wednesday night. But when you're talking about the guy that's starting on the pole and he's going to have the clean, he's going to have clean air initially, and clean air is king at these intermediate tracks. There's no reason why he can't immediately just march to an initial lead and just start knocking off dominator points. I know that we have a lap 20 competition caution. Now, I don't think that this is going to operate like it did last week, where the field just gets frozen and that you can't do anything to try to advance your position on pit road. Perhaps this week we see something squirrely where somebody, instead of taking 4 tires, they'll take 2, or they'll just take a splash and go. So there's the chance that Kurt could just march out, lead the first 20 laps, but then after that competition caution, he could easily lose it. But something you got to remember, this is a 400 lap race, 600 miles. There is no reason for drivers to start getting cute after 20 laps, and hopefully their crew chiefs understand that. So yeah, I really like that for GPPs. getting Kurt in there as a potential dominator, especially at his salary at only 8,700. When the chalk move is just going to be going down a couple of $100 and playing Blaney for his place differential.
Yeah, so that's going to be a tough choice. I mean, one option is kind of going mid-range for several different picks, and then you don't have to really punt at the end. We will talk about punts in a little bit, but one of the concerns with Kurt Busch is that the front row of this race, I mean, or the starting positions, Jimmie Johnson is second, Chase Elliott is third. These are guys that could challenge him for leading the race pretty early on. So I don't think we can kind of lock in Kurt Busch as the early leader.
Yeah.
Particularly Chase Elliott starting at third. I mean, he's got probably the best car of the three, and I have him as my number one laps led driver today at 50 of the 400. You can get that information on my projections. So, how are you feeling about Jimmie Johnson and Chase Elliott, who also have that premier position to start off?
Jimmie, I never know if we had practice, then I'd have something a little more reasonable to go off of. But now it's just an assumption that his setup is good, and quite frankly, you look at everybody starting in the top six. It's all Chevys. So I mean, Chevy has apparently come to Charlotte with speed. Charlotte has always kind of been one of Jimmie's better tracks, even in these last few years where Jimmie has definitely been falling off. The where his talent hasn't matched with what it used to be. He's always still kind of ran good at Charlotte. Ran here eighth last year, fifth the year before that. So with this newfound speed, the uptick that Hendrick has had this year, Jimmie could definitely be up there to compete for the lead. But yeah, I would rather bet on Chase. Chase has he's been the victim of circumstance this year. He's run really well in this package, but if his finishes definitely haven't shown it. Case in point, Wednesday night where he was fighting for second and he got dumped. If you were looking at anybody in this top six as a like potential dominator to start your lineups with, and you weren't looking to get crazy, Chase would probably be the guy that I'm looking at. If I go back to the laps led data page on the race sheets and I look at where the top two lap leaders come from, I scroll down this line. It's always the top six, and generally the top three. So I mean that definitely fits the criteria for Chase tonight.
Yeah, so Chase Elliott would be one of those guys where he's not one of the top names in NASCAR necessarily. In fact, looks like he is the seventh highest priced guy, but that premier position, especially with some of the other top names like Busch, Harvick, Hamlin starting pretty far back today, he is a guy where maybe you'd want to put in one of these guys starting in first through third to kind of get that potential to get that first round or first stage leader. That's going to be a strategy I'm going to be looking at today pretty hard. And Chase Elliott's price tag is pretty reasonable. So, but I mean, the odds favorites to win today are Martin Truex, Kyle Busch, and Kevin Harvick. Truex is starting in eighth, and that's a really tough position because it's not favorable for leading the race early or placement points. So I'd say, I mean, it's a little bit tougher to get to him, but the price is actually a lot cheaper than Busch and Harvick, and he has a good course history. So how does Truex fit into your plans today?
Truex is the guy that I want to start lineups with. Just my heart and my mind, they want to go to the guy that has finished first, second, third the last 3 years in this race. 131.2 driver rating over the last 3 years, averaging 98 FanDuel points per race, averaging 117.1 DraftKings points per race. There's nothing to not like about this about this guy. His odds are good. I'm not too concerned about him starting 8th. He's got all night to work his way up to the front. He's always been a really good evening into night racer. I had really substantial worries about him coming into this season because Cole Pern, his former crew chief, stepped away. But I mean, Truex hasn't lost a step this season. His finishes aren't that great, but he's kind of like Chase. It's something bad happens in the last stage, and here he is finishing in the teens compared to where he ran. This is one of Truex's best tracks, if not his best, and he's the guy that I'm looking to put in as my number one dominator, probably in the majority of my lineups on DraftKings and FanDuel.
Yeah, I mean, there's no arguing he's one of the best drivers today for sure. I'm a little bit more tepid on him because, I mean, there's so much variance in who gets the dominator points from week to week. I'm not really looking at that qualifying time of 8th and taking much note of that because, I mean, top speed doesn't correlate that well to who's going to have the highest average speed necessarily. So I think all the signs are good. It's just that there's so many guys that are going to be competing for these dominator points, and I'm not so much higher on Truex than the other ones. I mean, Harvick, he pairs nicely with maybe a Chase Elliott because he's starting in 22nd. So he's a guy that you can pick to kind of work his way up and then lead towards the end of the race. He's my highest projected guy today. Kind of combining that placement differential and dominator potential. How are you feeling about Harvick in comparison to Truex and Busch?
Yeah, Harvick may be the safest way to start off a cash team because of that place differential / dominator potential. It appears, if we look at where all of the SHR guys are at, it appears that they're playing a long game. Like they didn't really qualify that well, but that may spill over into them planning something later on into the night where their cars are more set up for the nighttime. So that's something to see. And hey, if you guys are so worried about stacking, you can put together an SHR stack real easy tonight. They're all going to give you tons of place differential. But remember, don't chase it. Yeah, Harvick, he is if you give yourself a headache trying to differentiate between Kyle Busch and Truex, who's going to be the one most likely to lead laps, just take the easier route and go with Harvick because you're getting place differential with him. Plus, you have that added upside of him leading laps, possibly towards the end of the race.
Definitely, yeah. Definitely, yeah. I like what you're saying about Cash, how Harvick really stands out because he has those bonus points from the place differential that a Busch and Truex don't have. Busch kind of have his third of the bunch because he doesn't have as good a starting position of 11, and the price is actually the highest on DraftKings of all the three guys. But he is tied for the best odds to win today. So how do you reconcile kind of all this information to decide if you're going to put Busch in your lineup?
Yeah, Kyle, as good as Martin Truex numbers were that I just read off, Kyle's numbers are even better. He has a higher driver rating, averaging more DraftKings points. But the thing to know about Kyle is that over these past 3 races, his average starting position has been second. So Kyle has generally, with qualifying, put himself in a position to lead laps because of where he's starting, plus his pit stall. When you look at Martin Truex Jr., his average starting position is 12.3. So this is a position that Truex is used to being. It's not starting up towards the front and then working his way up towards the front. This is a little bit of a different scenario for Kyle, but I mean, it's nothing that Kyle himself can't overcome. The only question is if you're weighing out Kyle versus Kevin, does Kyle lead that many more laps, gain that many more fastest laps than what Harvick has potential with place differential to outscore him?
Yeah. Man, there's so many pros for all these guys. It's like my advice would be just after 3 lineups. Something I think we can agree on probably is that you don't want to put more than one Harvick, Truex, and Kyle Busch in your lineup just because it's difficult allocating that much salary to 2 guys. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, yeah. It's because there are so many options tonight, so many legitimate options. Because I'm looking here at the super sheet, and I've got 4 guys highlighted in purple that I would automatically say give you pretty good options as dominators, and then you can throw Kevin Harvick into that lot, and then you've got whatever could happen between Kurt and Jimmie. You've got so many different combinations of drivers that you can throw together for potential dominators. It's you probably don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, but then again, it's going to be hard, even if you hit 150 entries to cover all of your bases.
Yeah, I mean, you got to take some stands here and there, but
That's why
yeah.
we're playing Ryan Blaney and Aric Almirola.
All right, let's talk about some of the placement differential guys because I feel like those are the safe bets tonight. And I'll start off with the guy starting last because he spun off in his qualifying run and did not complete it. Aric Almirola. I mean, I have him finishing um, about middle of the pack on average because of that starting position, but that's going to be a tremendous result for the salary. So, is Almirola just someone you want to lock and load today?
Yeah, I don't think it's worth overthinking it with Almirola. He's finished 11th and 13th the past 2 years here at Charlotte. He's in a good vehicle. With that competition caution at lap 20, he should be probably in the teens by the uh, by the 30s or 40s. So not worried about him. Could he possibly wreck out? Yes, but God, everybody can possibly wreck out. Something, everybody has the potential for something to happen to them. So yeah, you give Almirola 20 place differential spots and just let him finish at 20th. That's still a good day.
Definitely, yeah, that's gonna give you those points that you really want to pair along with your dominators. And the other guy, it sounds like you're just as keen on Ryan Blaney as me because I'm looking at this 26 starting position and his odds are around 20 to 1 to win the race, which are tremendous compared to his salary of 8,100.
Right.
So, like, what happened here? Why is he such a good play this week when other weeks maybe he earned that salary of 8,100?
Well, besides the obvious thing that you just talked about with his odds not matching his DraftKings price, that stands out like a sore thumb. We've also got Blaney running. He's ran really well in this package, and now we've got the 26th starting position. Blaney was already a guy that I was going to consider as kind of one of those fringe dominator options if he was starting in the teams. But now that he's in the starting 26th and he's only 8,100 on DraftKings, I mean, it's a really good position to be in, to be on him tonight. Now, if you look at the race sheet, you look at his last 3 finishes, they are nothing to be excited about. 13th, 36th, and 24th. But I don't think we're worried about that. If you are going to hone in on something, the thing that I've said all this week is that last year's race is probably the most comparable to what we have tonight, thus meaning a wreck fest. So Blaney came through 13th last year. If Blaney can do that again, you're looking close to probably a 50-point night.
Yeah, that would probably be enough to do it for that $8,100 price tag, and I have him at 60 points on average.
Ooh,
so
I love it.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe he's a sneaky fastest lap and laps leader guy. So working his way towards the front. Now, I've seen a lot of talk about Matt Dibenedetto. I mean, he wrecked his car in qualifying, basically. So he's going on to the backup car, and his starting position of 33 is very good compared to the budget of his team. But what does this mean that he's going to the backup car first chances tonight?
Okay, yeah, he absolutely pancaked the right side of that car during qualifying, but he still managed to make a qualifying lap. So the the damage is too great to fix, so they're just going to roll the backup car. Now he'll still be scored from 33rd. I know that's the question everybody on Twitter will have. What's his starting position? He still starts 33rd, but he's going to start either right behind or right next to Aric Almirola when they come off the green flag. So you're getting essentially uh, the Penske number 4 car starting 33rd at just 7,300 on FanDuel, 7,200 on DraftKings. I mean, that's a stupendous deal for a guy who has really, Dibenedetto has always said, "Put me in good equipment, and I will show you how good of a racer I am." And he's having an outstanding year in this Wood Brothers number 21 car. So you're getting a good racer, good equipment, Penske related. He should be a really good play tonight. If you look at his past numbers, they are absolutely dreadful. Like I don't know what has been going on with him in these cars. Now you can't just blame it on equipment. Well, I guess you could, but I mean we're talking about 39th, 37th, 37th. Those are his last 3 finishes in the Coke 600. So if you're expecting that to continue tonight, like Matt just sucks horribly at this race, like at this racetrack, he can't even finish a qualifying lap, then he makes a great jumping off point. And when it comes down to it, yeah, you're going to put in Blaney, yeah, you're going to put in Almirola and Cash, and you can put in Dibenedetto easily, but when you're trying to negotiate your dominators in that Cash lineup, you may have to find yourself jumping off of Dibenedetto. Burrito Boy, you may find yourself having to jump off of him at that $7,200 price tag on DraftKings and moving a little bit down because he only starts 33rd.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he's probably not a guy that you want to be enthusiastic about kind of like having in all your lineups.
Yeah,
Good
and
play, but not an excellent one, I'd say.
yeah, and plus this is the thing. We have no idea what this backup car is like. We have, there's a reason it's the backup car and the primary car was the one on the track. So with this primary car being trashed and then having to go to the backup car, who knows what you're getting with this vehicle. Obviously, it should be better than what Joey Gase and JJ Yeley are running out there, but we we don't know just what we're getting with this backup car, and it could be, it definitely shouldn't be as good as what the primary was going to be.
Yeah, so one thing I keep an eye out for is how these odds change leading up to the race. And the best odds for Dibenedetto before qualifying were about 75 to 1. Now the best odds you can get are about 125 to 1. So, I mean, it is a marginal difference. But when you're talking about who the best plays are on a given night, he's someone where if he had his first car or his main car and he's running 33rd, I'd lock him in. But just a little bit of hesitation there for me.
Yeah.
One guy that's been befuddling me this year, but he has a great starting position is Daniel Suarez. And I thought, he had a big downgrade on his team over the offseason. So everyone was like, he's going to be the next like Timmy Hill or JJ Yeley or something. But he's put up respectable like times. He's been on the lead lap most of the time. And that's good enough for a guy that's starting in 37th at 6,100. Now he's not a top play, but as far as someone that you might go to if you need a punt.
Yeah, he's still a little overpriced for my taste on DraftKings, but I mean you can't ignore 37th starting position. He if you wanted to play him in cash, assuming that he's going to pick up maybe 10 spots because of how far he's starting back. That's definitely a respectable play. Daniel's last 3 finishes. Now, reminder, this was in the 41 and then in the 19 the 2 years before that, 18th, 15th, and 11th. He's got plenty of experience at this track, and when you're looking for that last punt play / value play, I think that's probably what you're looking for. is experience. Because remember, this is going to be a grueling race. A lot of these guys have never been in a race this long, and fatigue and mental wear is going to definitely be a factor. And when you've got Suarez, who's been in this race plenty of times before, he knows what to expect. He knows what to do, and he'll have place differential gain while these other guys fade back. It's a good play.
Nice. Yeah. So he might be a guy that goes a little bit more under the radar, but maybe he helps you sneak in some better drivers fit around him. Now, one guy, I'm kind of just going down my list of top placement differential on my projections. Clint Boyer starting in 20th. I think we'll get to him in the next segment. Cole Custer, 28th. Now, this is a guy that he's also a lead lap guy. He's kind of on the cusp of, um, you know, that starting position where it's like pretty good, but not anything to get excited about. But maybe if you throw him in with some of these other low price guys, you can stack the rest of your lineup. So, how does Cole Custer fit into your thoughts today?
I like the 28th starting position, but this goes back to what I just mentioned with Ty. I am kind of worried that this is his inaugural Coke 600 race. Now I get kind of worried about that with him and with Christopher Bell, and especially with Tyler Reddick as far forward as he's starting. You know, just how well prepared are these guys for this long of a race? You know, it seems that SHR has a game plan, and hopefully Cole's keen to what that game plan is, because whatever the setup is that Boyer and Harvick are running with, it seems that Cole probably is doing the same thing, since they all kind of are starting around the same area. So perhaps Cole has the long range view in mind here, and makes progress forward throughout the night. And starting 28th, he doesn't really have that far backward to go. And at 6,400, that's a respectable price for him on DraftKings. I think probably the safer play in cash would be going down to Daniel Suarez because of that many more place differential spots. But Custer definitely has the higher ceiling of the two.
Awesome. Yeah, so he's the guy that's definitely in the mix, Cole Custer. I've been getting a couple questions in the chat about the promo code for $2. You can get the projections, ownership, top driver tool for this race. What you need to do is go to awesemo.com/join, use the promo code NASCAR600, select the NASCAR weekly package. So that's a little chance to try it out. We got some great tournaments today. Also, a lot of NASCAR races between Xfinity, Cup, and the Truck Series this week. So a lot of opportunities to play fantasy NASCAR. So this is a great time to learn how to do it. And the other questions we're getting a lot about are weather. Now, I can guarantee for a fact your lineups will lock at 6 p.m. Eastern, almost certainly. So the only question is, are they going to do a partial race tonight, a full race tonight, or will it be postponed, in which case it will be a full race, but just at a different time and date?
In past years, I would say NASCAR would do everything within their power to make sure that this race didn't get past halfway so that they could postpone it until Monday. Once again, have everybody's eyes on Fox as they restart the race. I remember this happened back in 2010. The race, they had to stop it, and they tried starting it over again several times on Monday, and finally they just had to call the thing for rain, and that was David Rudiman who ended up winning that race for Michael Waltrip. This year, I'm not so certain about that. You've got the Xfinity race that needs to happen Monday night. You've got the truck race that needs to happen Tuesday night, and then Cup is coming back on Wednesday night to race again here. I have the sneaking suspicion that if we get past halfway tonight and they lose the track, despite the fact that they do have lights here at Charlotte, that they may very well call the race, which brings up a very interesting idea of building lineups for only 200 to say 250 laps, which would dramatically affect what you're doing with dominators. And
So
in that case, then you probably are looking at a Kevin Harvick plus the chalk place differential guys.
definitely. So what I would say you want to pivot to if you're playing for a weather shortened race is you want to emphasize those guys that have the good starting positions like Almirola, like Dibenedetto, because those are going to make up a larger percentage of the points if there are less laps led and fastest laps points.
Right.
All right. So let's move on. We talked a lot about the punts. Let's get to these guys that maybe are like the lower owned contrarian guys. And the kind of circumstances that are going to lead to this are mostly a bad starting position that doesn't really give you a lot of upside for leading the race or for getting placement differential points. So a good example would be a guy like Ryan Newman, who's starting in 18th. Now he's a guy that he certainly a decent driver. The price is good, but it's just hard to imagine him putting up 50 points. Let's go case by case here. So with Newman at 18th, would that be a guy you'd play, or is it just such a long shot to make the winning lineup?
Not Newman. Newman is forever going to be a 13th to 18th place driver in this equipment. You know, and that may be the kind of guy at 6,500 that you need in a lineup that's going to score more points than a John Hunter Nemechek, a Cole Custer, a Ryan Preece, simply because of his finishing position. You know, if this race stays fairly green, then drivers are going to get lapped, and perhaps Newman does enough. You know, this was kind of my idea with Austin Dillon last Sunday. Just does enough, stay on the lead lap, ensure that he's hanging around there, and then by the time you look at the end of the race, he's finished 13th. Yeah, he's maybe picked up a couple of place differential spots, but the majority of his points are coming from his finishing position. Yeah, and at 6,500, what do you really need for him to do for you? You just need him to finish in the top 15.
Yeah, essentially what you need is for the other place differential guys to not do well. I think so. I mean, there's an outside chance Newman could finish in top 10. I mean, we've seen some like crazy finishers in the top 10 even like the past couple races. So not out of the realm of possibility. In fact, I actually have one of them as a 2% chance of being one of the top 6 scoring drivers. That's something I have for every driver on my top drivers tool. So then is the question, well, you look at the ownership and he is at 20%. So like if that ends up being true, like that's an auto fade, I'd say. But we'll see how that shakes out. Now, I'll look at the lower owned guys. So we have a lot of guys that fall into the category of Timmy Hill, BJ McLeod, JJ Yeley, Garrett Smith, Quinn Hoff. Sorry, I'm butchering some of these names. Greg Galding. These are kind of like the guys that are going to get laughed a million times. So what you need for one of these guys to crack the winning lineup is a lot of crashes, I think. Is that your take on like how these guys would make it?
Yeah, this is that scenario was exactly what happened to Corey LaJoie last year. Corey qualified well, raced his way up there, benefited from the millions of wrecks that we had, tons of single car and assisted wrecks. He kept getting lucky dogs, stayed on the lead lap, and he finished 12th. I mean, he definitely did more than enough to pay off his salary and became an essential part to building lineups last year. Are we expecting the same from Corey this year? Probably not. He is pitiful in that 32. Whatever money or partnership is being kicked over from Stewart-Haas, it doesn't look like it's transferring this year to Go Fast Racing. But you've got all these guys back here, that are starting in the 20s or the 30s, these low price guys that are just as capable of producing what Corey did last year. You just need a little luck on your side with these guys. Find a way to just keep staying on the lead lap, keep moving up through attrition, because that will be basically what it is that they're hanging out by themselves, just knocking off laps, while the rest of these guys are fighting for position and end up wrecking, end up blowing an engine, end up cutting a tire, whatever. And they just kind of keep matriculating forward, keep moving up the grid, and finish in the teens, or maybe finish in the 20s, the high 20s by the end of the night, pick up 10 plus place differential spots in the process.
Yeah, so like first of all, one of these guys has to have like kind of an outlier performance. Although I'd say like another way you can get there is just like it's the only way you can fit in like a certain set of dominators that just have huge scores. But among these guys that are kind of like the underfunded teams, like which guys would be ones you'd be the most likely to take a shot on? I'll throw out a name here.
Yeah, throw me a bone here.
Okay. So the guy that I mean, there's a couple guys that I like kind of at the bottom range. JJ Yeley. I mean, he's switching sponsors from week to week, but he's been a little bit better like every week than some of these other guys at the bottom, where it's like maybe he gets lapped a little bit less. And then the other guy is Brennan Poole at starting 35th. He's been one of the faster guys that all these guys have basically the same odds to win, which are 0. But he's going to finish ahead of the other guys like BJ McLeod and Timmy Hill most of the time. So are those guys you take a shot on maybe?
Okay, yeah. If you're looking at that $59 to $5,000 range, and you're not just looking at a guy like Michael McDowell, who's probably going to be the guy that most people go with in this range, then I think you probably are looking at Brennan Poole. Brennan keeps qualifying poorly, but then moving his way up throughout the race here. Like in this package this year, he has an average finish of 31.3. So if you just give him another 31st place finish, then he's picking up, 4 spots, perhaps more. You look at JJ Yeley. You just mentioned him. He's had a lot more speed than you would think in this package. His average finish through these 4 races is 28.8. So if you give him 6 place differential spots plus a 28th finish for 4,700, that's probably the best value on the board for all of these guys.
Yeah. So these are guys where you're really going to tank your overall projection, I think, because the optimal lineup is going to be going to some of the more expensive guys and having that balanced construction. But if you want to go like Harvick and Truex, you're going to need to have some cheap guys. So maybe Yeley and Brennan Poole would be options. All right. So I'm going down the list of the lowest owned plays. I mean, those guys are kind of in the 3 to 4% range. Christopher Bell. This is a guy. He's and also I'll throw Chris Buescher in this category. These guys are newer names to the NASCAR scene. They do not have the place differential potential today necessarily, because Bell is starting in 15th, Buescher in 19th. So they have the worst possible starting positions for place differential and leading the race. Is there any way you'd still click those names?
Buescher's like a 1 to 3% play in tournaments for me. Starting 15th, you really don't have that many positions that he can probably legitimately grab. Plus, this will be his first Coke 600, so that gives me pause. This definitely has been a Toyota track of late, so maybe that game planning comes down to Bell in the 95. But yeah, he's definitely one of those guys that I might just throw into like 1 to 3% of lineups. Buescher was pretty good here last year in the 37. He finished 6th, but remember that was fueled mostly by the by the sheer amount of wrecks. He just kept moving his way forward. He's a little more expensive on DraftKings than Newman for just the one place differential position that you get. But I think I would rather go with the safer pick at Newman if you were having to pick between those two.
Yeah. So maybe some guys that you might sprinkle in, but they're definitely better picks. Our one guy that has been the source of a ton of consternation for all of DFS is Ricky Stenhouse. Wrecked on the very first lap in the first race back, and then last week just had kind of a dud performance. Now today he's starting in 17th, so he doesn't have that placement differential potential. But is he a sleeper?
Yeah, he's definitely a guy who has ran well here. This was in 17 the last 3 years, but finishes of 5th, 10th, and 15th. He's shown the propensity to move forward in this race. The only question is how much of a fall off is there between the 17 and the 47. At 7,400, he's in kind of the no man's land where people aren't going to be looking for him. Because, you just go up $100 on DraftKings and you've hit Aric Almirola. So, he's a pivot in some sense, but I just don't trust him.
Yeah, so he may be a guy where just people are so hesitant to click that name because of the game log, and there's not much incentive to go to him in the first place. So maybe a guy that goes under the radar. He has a 2.6% chance of being one of the top 6 scoring drivers according to my top drivers tool. So definitely not unrealistic that he could be in the winning lineup. So a guy to keep an eye on. Now, one of the guys that's starting way farther forward than I thought is Austin Dillon, starting 6th. Very low projected ownership at 8%. Not a guy that you think of as being a dominator, but is there a chance today?
No, for me, it's a Davis Maddock nah wave. I fear that him and Reddick are way too trimmed out for qualifying. That's why they did so well, and I can just see them steadily falling back the rest of the race and possibly ending with negative points.
Yeah, that's the concern whenever you take one of these guys that's starting a little bit farther forward than their car.
And if people look at Dillon's past history, they'll see 34th last year, 34th the year before that, but the win. Remember that win was because he played the fuel strategy game, stayed out late in the race, and ended up winning because of that. It wasn't because he earned that win by any means.
One thing we could see today is if the rain does shorten the race, we see some of these mid-range guys stay out a little bit longer to try to catch everyone on a pit when the race ends. That could be a situation where you have a really long shot winner coming out of this race. So, what do you think the chance of that really is? We saw last race, people were taking that strategy.
Yeah, for sure. Part of me thinks that this race doesn't go the full 400 laps, but where it ends before that is anyone's guess. If I was betting for outright winners, I would still probably just go with the favorites. When we're talking about a super speedway like Talladega or Daytona, you can throw those lottery tickets out there because they have a realistic chance to win, like Justin Haley did it at Daytona last summer. But probably for a race like this, I would be looking at your Martin Truex Jr., your Kyle Busch, your Denny Hamlins, Chase Elliott's, guys like that.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of these mid-range drivers, they have good top speed, but they just cannot maintain it throughout the whole race. So
yeah,
that'll be a situation where a guy like Reddick or Austin Dillon qualifies much better than you'd expect, and it is just kind of a glimmer in the pan. All right, so We got a special deal going on. NASCAR 600 is the coupon code, $2 for our premium NASCAR package for the 2 days. So it's today's NASCAR race and tomorrow's Xfinity race. Make sure to take advantage of that. Phill has an article, several articles a week now on the NASCAR races. So make sure to go to awesemo.com. Those are free. So I always enjoy reading those. And
yeah, give me your clicks. I'm just here for the clicks.
Yeah, make sure to follow us, Race Sheets on Twitter for Phill, and I'm Awesemo on DFS. And Phill, any final words for our viewers here?
Buckle in, folks. This is a long race. You can probably take a 3-hour nap in the race and wake up and still be able to sweat your lineup.
That's a good strategy. Make sure not to check your results. That's not gonna be very accurate. Especially, it's always funny when everyone pits and then your winnings go from like 0 to like 200,000 or whatever.
Yep.
But so what I'd advise for cash, heavily focus on these guys with the placement differential. That's much more consistent than dominator points or spend all your salary. For tournaments, make sure you have a good mix of those high price dominators and those placement differential guys. And of course, use projections and our ownership to kind of figure out who the best plays are and the sleepers. So, guys, thanks for tuning in to that NASCAR DFS strategy show. Locks in about an hour. I'm making a final projection update as we speak. And hope to see a 200K winner watching this. If you do, make sure to let us know. All right, guys, thanks a lot for tuning in.